There is something unmistakably off in NASCAR right now, and anyone who has been watching every single race this season can feel the tension building beneath the surface. It is the kind of pressure that starts behind the scenes and slowly bleeds onto the track until it becomes impossible to ignore. Two very different stories are unfolding at the same time, and together they paint a fascinating picture of where this sport stands today. One about elite performance falling apart at the worst possible moments, and another about a completely new kind of energy pulling fresh audiences into motorsports. Let's start with what has been happening to Ryan Blaney, because this situation is getting harder to overlook the deeper we get into the season. After the race at Bristol Motor Speedway, where Blaney was beaten by Ty Gibbs, the real headline was not just the finishing order. It was what has been quietly happening on pit road week after week. Through the first 8 races of the season, the number 12 crew has surrendered a total of 86 positions on pit road. That is not a one-off mistake or a rough afternoon. That is a pattern, and in NASCAR, patterns like that have a way of silently dismantling an entire championship campaign before the playoffs even arrive. Team Penske recognized the problem and decided to act. The initial plan was to swap out Jackman Land and Honeycutt and bring in Patrick Gray from the number 21 car at Wood Brothers Racing. Given the tight technical alliance between Penske and Wood Brothers, that kind of move typically flows without much friction. It made sense on paper, and it seemed like a reasonable step toward fixing the bleeding on pit road. But then, within hours of that announcement, everything changed again. Patrick Gray would not be heading to Kansas after all, stepping away for personal reasons confirmed by the team. So instead of one clean adjustment, the team now found itself scrambling for yet another solution just before race weekend. The replacement they landed on was Graham Stoddard, who has been working on the number 4 car at Front Row Motorsports alongside Noah Gragson. Stoddard is not unfamiliar with high-pressure environments, but walking into a crew that is already struggling with consistency and rhythm is a challenge of an entirely different magnitude. And the ripple effects did not stop there. With Stoddard shifting over to the number 12, Tommy Bebby from the number 51 car, and Cody Ware stepped in to fill the gap left on the number 4 crew. Honeycutt, meanwhile, stayed with the number 21 at Wood Brothers exactly as originally planned. So heading into Kansas Speedway, Blaney's operation had gone from one change to another to what amounts to a near-complete reshuffle, and the team still had no confirmation on whether Patrick Gray would return after Kansas or whether Stoddard would hold the role going forward. That decision was deliberately pushed until after the race weekend. From a fan's perspective, this is genuinely frustrating to watch because the driver is clearly not the issue here. Ryan Blaney has the talent and the equipment to compete for a championship. This is entirely a team execution problem, and losing 86 positions on pit road across 8 races is exactly the kind of slow damage that sneaks up on a team and derails a season before anyone realizes how deep the hole has gotten. Pit crews are built on rhythm, trust, and the kind of chemistry that only comes from repetition and familiarity. Rotating personnel at the last minute, especially under pressure and especially heading into a track like Kansas, is a gamble. Bringing in Graham Stoddard might provide a short-term spark, but if Team Penske cannot stabilize this situation soon, Blaney will keep paying the price regardless of how fast the car actually is on race day. Shifting to an entirely different kind of story, Cleetus McFarland has been making moves that reflect something much bigger than just one person's racing career. He recently signed a multi-year endorsement deal with Polaris, and this partnership goes well beyond a traditional sponsorship arrangement. This is about the intentional blending of motorsports culture with the digital content world in a way NASCAR has not really experienced before. Cleetus has built a following of nearly 5 million subscribers on YouTube, all centered around the Freedom Factory and the high-energy, personality-driven content that has become his signature. Loud cars, burnouts, events that feel more like outdoor festivals than organized racing, and an atmosphere that makes the whole thing feel genuinely alive and fun. Polaris clearly saw the value in that world and decided they did not want to simply observe from a distance. They wanted to be part of what Cleetus is building, and the authenticity of that brand connection is exactly what makes it work. The energy Cleetus brings is not manufactured or calculated. It is real, and audiences respond to it because it feels accessible in a way that traditional motorsports content sometimes does not. That is a powerful thing, especially for a sport that has been working hard to attract younger and broader audiences. On the track itself, Cleetus is still very much in the process of learning. He made his Truck Series debut at Daytona International Speedway earlier in the season and more recently competed at Rockingham Speedway in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, finishing 32nd and ending up 6 laps down. Those are not the kind of results that turn heads from a pure performance standpoint, but they are not the full story either. The competition level in any NASCAR-affiliated series is genuinely serious, and the jump from content creation and grassroots events to professional oval racing is enormous. The results are honest, and honest is the right way to approach a process like this one. The next chapter of his journey could be a significant one. Cletus is scheduled to compete at Talladega Superspeedway on April 25th, pending NASCAR approval for a superspeedway start. For anyone who understands what Talladega represents, the speeds, the pack racing, the razor-thin margins, this is not a casual opportunity. It demands experience, situational awareness, and a deep respect for the track's unique dangers. Whether NASCAR grants that approval is a decision being watched closely, because the outcome carries weight both for Cletus as a developing driver and for the broader conversation about how the sport engages with new personalities and non-traditional pathways into racing. When you look at these two stories side by side, what emerges is a surprisingly clear reflection of where NASCAR stands right now. On one side, you have one of the sport's premier teams, Team Penske, with a former champion behind the wheel, struggling with the kind of operational execution problem that can quietly undo all the talent and resources in the world. On the other side, you have a content creator who has turned himself into a legitimate presence in the NASCAR ecosystem, backed by a major brand partnership and actively expanding who thinks of motorsports as something meant for them. These stories feel almost opposite in nature, but they are both happening in the same sport at the same moment, and that is what makes this period in NASCAR so genuinely interesting. The pressure and unpredictability at the elite level, combined with the cultural evolution happening at the edges of the sport, are both part of the same larger story. Kansas Speedway represented a potential turning point in both directions. Either Blaney's team finds its footing and stops the bleeding, or the problem deepens into something that follows them all the way to the playoffs. And for Cletus, the Talladega decision loomed as a moment that could define not just his trajectory, but the kind of statement NASCAR is willing to make about who belongs in its world. That combination of performance stakes and cultural momentum is exactly what makes this stretch of the season feel bigger than a typical few weeks on the schedule. Both stories deserve to be watched closely because the next few races could genuinely shift the direction of each one.